to make sure everyone understands why we've built what we've built. And we'll go through this really quickly, then we'll start talking about exactly what collaboration for Revit is, what it isn't, how it functions today, all that good stuff. So we think a lot about how BIM, as it exists today, can change for tomorrow. And one of those ways is around collaboration. So, we think about things yesterday as really being locally collaborative. I mean, you're working really collaboratively with people inside of your network. If you're physically together and you can shout over the transom, so to speak. That's the way things traditionally are. And tomorrow we really want them to be socially shared across wherever you are. And that's a key idea for us. And when we think about how things function today, there's usually this type of, hey, we got to have a wheel of BIM, this logical process of stuff moving from stage to stage. Our customers do the same things here, and you can go ahead and you can have a lot of different people involved in projects. So you could have, this is actually 14 different customers associated with this particular project. So a lot of stuff going on here. And ultimately the way it works though, it's like, you got a car that runs on IT labor and expensive hardware. I mean, that's basically how the data gets shuttled around here. So the system itself is fundamentally pretty broken. And so we've gone ahead and tried to address that problem with collaboration for Revit. And the first fundamental problem we've tried to solve is providing access to that information, that data across the project team, whether they're inside of a particular network or not. So let's keep drilling into that. So what we've done is we've changed the fundamentals of how Revit functions in terms of interfacing with the place of record for a particular model. So today, 99.9% of the time, if I'm doing a Sync with Central operation, I'm a machine running Revit inside of a network, talking to a network store or a Revit server running inside of a network. And what we're changing is we're taking that model, we're putting it in the cloud, and that's the service A360 Collaboration for Revit. So it's a modern cloud service that's been built by Autodesk to manage those central models for the entire project team. And really what that does at a fundamental level is it gets technology out of the way, and it allows you to have a team architecture where it's not really about the network conditions that you have so much as it is about how you want to work as a team. So you've got individual sites from a single company could work on the same sets of models without a lot of barriers, or entire multi-firm teams can work together. And so in terms of the value that's delivered, first and foremost, it's cloud work sharing. Multi-firms concurrently authoring models together here. Beyond that, one of the things our customers have told us, Revit Server is a product that we as a company, Autodesk, we don't charge people for. But it's not free because you got to maintain servers, you got to pay IT people to actually maintain those servers, keep stuff updated. You got to update clients with INI files, stuff like that. And we were looking for the types of experience you get with like a Dropbox or a Box. I mean, most of the time, if you go use Dropbox, you don't have to type in an IP address to Dropbox. You just use Dropbox and it works. And so we tried to have that kind of existing user experience. And then finally, the building information models for the project are now located in the cloud, and they're accessible for other cloud services for really useful things. So that's also a value that we delivered here. And we think that's really exciting in the long term, and I think you guys can see in the short term some of the value that we can extract out of that when we talk about the A360 integration that we have. So diving into some of the technicalities, we'll talk more about this in question and answer as well as the demo, but I always like to get through these things at a high level so everyone's on the same page. We've done a pretty big investment around getting the data to the machine before it's needed. So we do this intelligent data caching. What it means is you have a little process that runs on every user's machine. We call that the Accelerator. And so what that does is it, via deltas, we're never pushing full models across the pipe other than basically the first time you open them. But once it's been opened on a machine, you're transacting in the form of deltas. And so as others are submitting changes to that place of record for the model, the cloud work shared model, the deltas of those changes are being prefetched by this accelerator process. And so you're really only working on data cached, and you're only transferring across the pipe those deltas. So we think that can help improve performance. Looks like my webcam just went off here. So let me do a tech check. So bear with me for just 1 second, guys. So we talked about the data caching that's there. A couple other things to talk about. The first and foremost is the service, the way it functions today, functions under what we call a high-trust workflow. So basically what that means is it's designed for highly collaborative projects that are where the actual models being authored are being authored by teams that trust each other not to do nefarious or, overtly dumb things. So, if I've got a project team together and, the structural models are there with the architectural models and the MEP models, if I'm on the architectural team, I could technically open an MEP model and start moving some ductwork. If you're in a project where the dynamics of that project mean you don't trust the architect not to do that, which is kind of overtly a dumb thing, it's probably not the right service for you today. Clearly, we recognize that there's a desire for that, and of course, I think over time you'll see a lower trust model that's delivered here. But right now, just for the purposes of full disclosure, it works under a high trust workflow. And for the teams that work in that highly collaborative manner, we found that it's perfectly viable for them to get their jobs done. And because of that high trust model, unless you want as designed out of the box, you're basically doing a live link workflow as well. Now there's a pretty straightforward workaround if you really hate this, but as designed today, you've got the central models linked amongst each other. So that's just kind of how that system functions, and I just want to make sure you guys are all aware of that. And definitely moving forward, we've got a plan to make a much better workflow where you kind of like major published models that are linked in between different teams and stuff. So that's definitely something we're working on, but that's how the service functions today. And once we get into demo, you guys can pepper us with whatever questions you actually have. The other thing is right now you can use A360 Team, which we'll talk about in a second. You can use A360 Team to actually contain things like DWGs and other stuff, but it doesn't currently sync down for you. So in many ways, you can work directly in Revit on your cloud work shared Revit models, but if you're linking in DWGs, you need to use other means to get those things locally. So there really isn't the idea of a cloud link of a DWG file or your Keynote files or stuff. Rest assured, that's definitely something that we're working on moving forward, but in terms of the very first release of this service, that's kind of how the service functions today. So those are just my caveats. As the product manager or marketing guy, I hate making these slides, but it's the reality of how the service functions today. And rest assured, we have a really well-resourced team that's working to improve some of these things. But I want to make sure you guys are clear on how the service functions. And like I said, when we get into the demo portion, you guys can pepper us with questions. So along with providing access to the data, we also want to be able to enhance communication amongst the team. And so, today people do crazy things like use detail views in a particular central model to post updates for everybody else to read. And I guess in a world where I've got like 8 chat apps on my smartphone for communicating amongst the people I know personally, it's kind of insane that you're using like a drafting view in a BIM platform to communicate amongst the team. We can do better than that, and so there's a lot of companies that do better than that. They provide communication systems that allow people to communicate in real time, but at the end of the day, Autodesk technology is one of the few pieces of consistent technology across the entire project team. If you're thinking about this as your individual company, yeah, you probably have your own chat system, but it's very rare that every single company on the design and construction team has the same communication system outside of email and phone, which is why that's the lowest common denominator. So Autodesk and our products are really one of the few consistent pieces in the tech stack. So that's reason one why we're kind of investing in here. And the second piece is when you're using our authoring tools, we can understand what you're working on, which means we can make it really simple to connect with others working on the same thing. And so it all comes together with an in-product chat tool. I can demo that in a second, that allows synchronous communication, so real time. It's not like email where it's like, hey, I sent you a message and get back to me whenever it works. It's an instant message, so there's an expectation of instantaneous communication. The tool also knows who you are and what you're working on, so it's able to understand, hey, you're working on this model, which is part of this project. Here's the other people in that model right now. Here's the other people working on models linked into your project, and then here's other people that are online that aren't working on your project, that idea. So that contextual awareness we think is really powerful. And then finally, we've integrated an activity feed, or the timeline as we call it, into the actual communications tool. So you're seeing when people are syncing with Central, get a little animated icon when that happens. We'll demo that in a second. So that's kind of a pretty cool tool in that it's connecting the team, and it's also making available information about who is doing what when. So we're trying to really take some of the mystique out of Revit work sharing. I mean, if you think about the reality that somebody can be, syncing with Central, doing major changes to models, and you don't have any idea that those changes have happened, like that's kind of crazy, and we can do better than that. So that's that piece. And the final investment is connecting the entire project team, and we do that via A360 Team. So hopefully you guys have heard about A360 Team. And we have plenty of other Hangouts if you guys want to drill into that a lot more. So I'm just going to go through the high notes. So A360 Team is all about expanding who touches the design data and reducing the barriers to those people to actually touch the design data. So traditionally, Autodesk, we only talk to the designers and the engineers on the project team. But there's a lot more people on the project team. And they're not typically using our stuff unless they're interfacing with PDF outputs, or they're part of screen shares where some Revit person is driving. So there's a much broader project team. And it's not just BIM data, it's a ton of different data. It's a whole boatload of spreadsheets. It's all kinds of PDFs. It's all kinds of Word documents. It's all kinds of stuff. And that stuff is not typically touched by our services. And then it's not just, there's a lot of activities and interactions going on, people talking, people marking things up, people having phone calls, and A360 Team is all about centralizing all of that information. So we like to think it centralizes the people, the data, and the activities, and it puts the project at the center of that. And that's really the key value we think of here. I mean, there's a lot of tools out there that do this sort of thing, but typically the anchor is like a folder. You know, the file folder as an analogy to contain all the stuff, it's like, it's just the data. It's not everything. And the project is really that anchor within A360, and we're excited about that. We think it's a powerful thing. And when you add on collaboration for Revit, we now have cloud work shared models that are playing into that system. We have the ability for people to chat with each other, at least inside of Revit for now. So that adds even more value. So let's talk a little bit about the actual A360 Team experience, knowing again that we can demo when you guys have questions. You know, we like to think you can share, view, and search any of the data in the project without requiring specialty tools. So without having Revit on your machine, as long as you have a modern web browser, you can go ahead and start viewing Revit models on your web browser and flying through them and making comments, eventually doing things like markup, and also searching. So as we get the data ready for being viewing on a web browser, we're also cracking open all the elements, dumping all the parameters into a search index so you can start searching stuff as well. And so we think that's really powerful in the longer term. Moving along here, gosh, this probably won't translate well, but I've got a little video here that is actually the experience in viewing. I'm going to demo this in a second, but yeah, I just love this video because you're in a web browser, but it feels like you're not. I mean, yay, modern technology for allowing smart dev teams to build these types of experiences, but you can drill into individual elements, you can see the properties, and you can even load up models like this, which, thank you very much to the Beck Group, is one of our customers, is one of their BIM building information models. There's 54 million polygons in Canvas. So if you've never had a reason to potentially get a 64-bit version of a web browser, this web viewer may be the first reason for you to do that, because you can load up huge scenes and actually render them and make it look gorgeous. So we're really excited about this technology. And we think the idea that anyone on the project team can be engaging with the model with this kind of a rich experience without requiring them to be dangerous in Revit, so to speak, we think that's really powerful. So let's talk about how Skyscraper or Collaboration for Revit, apologies. We used to call it Skyscraper. I slip sometimes. So the way the system functions today is when you do your initial sync with Central, you get a version on A360. As teams are syncing with Central from there, you actually don't get a version on A360. You get it when you push a version out there. So you go to your Manage A360 Models dialog, you hit the little button, and that pushes the data through what we call internally our derivative service. It's the thing that makes the data ready for viewing on your web and mobile device. And so that's kind of how the service functions today. In terms of the project structure, the way things typically function is a single company will have a hub, or as we call a hub. It's kind of a site. It's the actual domain or the URL that you go to that contains the project. And then from there, within that project, you have members and contributors. The members are host company employees who are members of that hub. So the members are people that the host company is paying for to be part of the A360 project. Then you've got employees of other companies that are in there as project contributors. It doesn't cost any money to include somebody as a project contributor. So if you're the firm hosting the project, you can invite everybody from all your consultants, and it's not going to cost you any more to have them working in that particular project. And then there's host company employees who are just in that project. So along with those project members who are paid, you can have people in as project contributors. The big difference is if I'm a contributor in a project in a company's hub, I can't see any other projects in that hub. So if I'm part of the MEP consultant, I only know that this project exists. If the host company has 50 other projects that may have confidential stuff in there, I have no ability to access them. So that's their traditional project structure. And moving from there, when we think about it, there's three things that we've brought together. There's accessing the project data, there's enhancing communication, and there's connecting the entire team. And all those three things come together for A360 Collaboration for Revit. So for those of you wondering, okay, what is this thing? That's what it is. And what I think we're going to do now is talk a little bit about some of the capabilities, or we're going to do a bit of a demo, and we can go from there. But before I do demo, I'm guessing there's a bunch of questions that have started rolling in here. And so, Nisha, is there big stuff you want to talk about now based on what we've seen, or are our other panelists handling them pretty well?
Yeah, I think we've got a hold of the questions for now, so we're good to go.
Okay.
But is there anything that you want to ask Kyle at this point?
The only thing is some of these questions looks like they're being answered individually to the people, so you might want to highlight, for example, bandwidth usage.
Got it. Yeah, sure. So good question. So the system at rest doesn't really draw a ton of bandwidth. But when you're in the midst of a burst transfer, as we call it, if I'm doing a sync with central where I'm transferring those deltas, or in the worst case scenario, I'm opening a model for the very first time before we build that local cache, you want to be able to ramp up to roughly a 5 megabit per second connection, symmetrical, so up down. That's going to be effectively the maximum the service side can handle. So if you're throwing 20 megabit symmetrical connections to every individual user, that's basically overkill because the service itself won't go past 5 at the current state. But that's basically the best I can tell. Obviously, you don't need 5 megabits per second allocated to every user at all times, at least not for our service, because we're not going to use that pipe. But you need to have a pipe that big for when it matters. Hopefully that's a good answer for you guys. So anything else, Bud or Nisha, before we get started in the demo here?
I think the rest looks pretty good.
Okay, cool. Well, keep asking questions, guys. Like I said, we got a deep bench today, so you guys can probably get your questions answered before it even gets to me. So let me minimize this. So this is a version of Revit 2015 that has the add-on for Collaboration for Revit installed. So just as a general note here, this service runs on effectively the bleeding edge of the released code for Revit. So to make it work, you basically have to have the latest update release of Revit, so the latest Revit code for 2015, plus the add-on that really makes this magic happen. So over time, I think that's going to start to change, but right now, we're developing with updates every month, and because of that, you need to make sure that you're on the latest code for everything to function. But that aside, it's a regular version of Revit. I'm actually working on a cloud work shared model here. So how can I tell that's a cloud work shared model? If I go to Synchronize Essential, the path is going to show up as A360. So I'm actually in a cloud work shared model. If I wasn't in one and I wanted to join one, I could go ahead and do that pretty straightforward. So if I go File Open here, oops, double click, my bad. There we go. My file open browser, I'm going to see an A360, the cool whip icon as I lovingly call it. And what's going to happen there is basically you're going to ping into A360 Team and ask, hey, what hubs am I on? What are the projects in that hub? And then it all gets grouped together in this list. So this is for Kyle Bernhardt. This is for my personal Autodesk ID. These are the projects I'm in. So I could drill into any one of these projects. These projects contain cloud work shared models. I happen to be on the one inside of Audubon. That was the one I picked, so I only have 2 cloud work shared models up. Looks like one of our sales guys added a 3rd one, but regardless, that's kind of how it functions. So I don't really have to care about network paths or anything else. I just hit A360 and it's going to tell me what projects I have. So that is also a common question we have with people that are familiar with Revit Server. A360 allows you to control who is a member of a project. So if I'm working on one project for a company, I can't view, see, or literally do anything with any other project going on in that company unless I'm also a member of that project. So you've got, not super fine-grained, but pretty good control over who can see what data. So that's what determines which projects show up, and I can open up models from inside of there. If, for example, I had a local model, and I'm going to shoot from the hip here a little bit, so bear with me. Whoops, wrong one. So if I'm going to go ahead and open up a project, back to file open, let's see. I'm going to open a local version of a model. So right now I'm locally opening a model. This just sits on disk here. If I wanted to get this thing up into the cloud, a common question is, hey, how do I get it there? Can I just upload it to A360 Team? The answer is not currently, and the reason why is we need the Revit application to get it up there right now. There's opportunities in the future to potentially change that, but right now you've got to use the Revit application. So it's a one-time deal to get it up in the cloud. So after this model locally opens, I'll show you that workflow, although I won't go through the motions to get it officially up there. But people always ask, how do I get the data? So let me show you guys that as we go. So this is a local model. It's finally loaded, it looks like. Almost. There we go. So it's finally loaded here, and we're going to go ahead and collaborate and push this thing up into the cloud. So what we do is we go to our Collaborate tab, which is where you go to start work sets historically on a model. But with this service, there's a bit of a change. So you see this option that's called Collaborate. And I got to hit this button before I can enable work sets. And so the way this works is we kept the existing functionality as is. So if I keep the radio button checked for Collaborate within your network, that's work sharing like it's always been. Nothing changes at all. If I choose to collaborate using A360, this is the fork in the road where we've gone down the fork that says make this a cloud work shared model. So when I hit select, this is a list of all the projects that I'm a member of. Doesn't necessarily have to be projects that have Revit models or cloud work shared models in them. This is just the projects that I'm a member of. So I'm going to say Kyle's test project. And I'm going to go ahead, if I initiate collaboration here, if I hit initiate, that's going to start the process of enabling work sets, uploading the model to the cloud, creating a cloud work shared model from that, and then getting a local cache working for me as a user. So that's kind of the whole process if I hit initiate. I'm not going to demo it, but hopefully you guys get the gist. So the process is I'm going to do that for all the models in my project if I'm migrating a project. Once I'm done, I build linkages between those models, and I'm going to show that here in a second. So, assuming for this model is called Audubon, there's an architectural and a structural model. If I'm migrating that project up to the cloud, I would go one at a time, migrate the structural model, migrate the architectural model, and then since there were links before, I need to remap those links because they used to be local links, and with Collaboration for Revit, you need to have cloud links. So there's no local Revit model linking with Collaboration for Revit. You need to use cloud links. And so the way you do that is you get each model up into the cloud, and then you hit reload from. And then from there, you're going to be presented with all the models in your current project that you have open, and you select from that one. And that's effectively going to create a cloud-to-cloud linking between the current host model you have and the link model that you have. And so that means that anyone on the project team, no matter where they are in the globe, as long as they have an internet connection and they're signed into Revit, they can start working on those models. So cloud-to-cloud links are awesome because you don't have to start worrying about paths anymore. It all just kind of works. So that's that piece around linking, getting models up there, and things along those lines. So I'll stop here, Bud. Are you seeing any questions coming in about the whole kind of getting models into the cloud topic that you'd like to cover here before we move on to other topics?
Right, yeah, one of the questions was how do the links get updated? Do they update dynamically, or do you have to do anything to update the links?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we haven't changed the functionality in Revit to handle that. So the way it functions is in a traditional workflow, you're linking central to central. So if I'm working on a host and I've got two links, right when I hit model open for the very first time, that is when I load the latest version of those linked models. And that Accelerator would have already prefetched the deltas so that it's a local operation to build a fresh state of each of those links. And then I'm working on that state of those links for the rest of my Revit session, unless I happen to hit the reload option. If I hit the reload option, that's going to then force a reload of the latest state of the linked model. If I sync with Central, that doesn't reload links. So syncing with Central doesn't reload the state of links, only hitting the reload button does. So as a general rule, you're always getting the latest version of your links when you hit model open. And like I mentioned earlier, there's some cases where you may not necessarily want that given the dynamics of the teams and the project. And in that event, basically what you do is, what you end up doing is you have a dead version of a model that is linked in. So just to give a concrete example, because we're demoing, and hey, let's demo here. If you hit Save As, what that does is that creates a detached local version. So if I'm the architectural team and I want to cut a version that I want my structural team to link in, I'm going to go ahead and hit Save As. I'm going to bring that locally, and then I'm going to initiate collaboration and onboard the model back up with a different file name. And the version that I just brought back up, my architectural team isn't going to work on. The architectural team continues to work on Audubon architecture, but there's a new version called Audubon Architecture Link that the structural team links in. So the structural team now has a static target that they're linking in. It's not going to change until my team says, all right, I've got my architectural model at a state, the live version at a state where I'm going to save as again. And then I'm going to onboard that new version up, architectural link again. And then that's going to basically replace the old version that was there, that dead link, and then the structural team sees it update. So, is it super smooth and integrated? No, not yet. We want to get there. But quite honestly, it's probably no worse than taking a version and throwing it up on an FTP site once a week. So that's the function around links. So any questions on that? Do we see anything coming through the wire to drill into that?
Yeah, well, I mean, wants to know who's responsible for creating that link, the master link?
So it's a good question. It's whoever wants to. So it's a one-time deal. So some, BIM manager, project lead, whoever decides that, they would like to issue that linked version could just do a local download. Again, it's a high-trust system, so anyone could technically do this. You could save it locally. As long as you're a member of the project, you can always create new cloud work shared model in that project.
Sounds good. And then one other question was, do the link files work with AutoCAD files, or how do they get linked? Yeah,
we mentioned that earlier. So right now, AutoCAD files need to be locally located. So between the different design teams, they need to get DWG synced via some other mechanism. Rest assured, we realized that it sure would be nice to cloud work share or cloud link your DWGs, and that's something we're working on. But the service right here, right now, you need to have locally located DWG files that are locally passed into your central model. Make sense? I assume the answer is yes, because our attendees can't talk to me. So moving along here, a couple other things to talk about, our Communicator tool. So I've got Communicator running here. It's contextually aware of what I'm working on. So it says, hey, I know you. You're Kyle. You're inside of Audubon Architecture. There's this guy, Paul Sanderson. He's also in this model. So over on my other machine that I've remoted into, I can switch over to him, and I'll do that in a second here. So Paul's in the same model as me, and here's the other people in my project. These are all sorts of other people in my project, and only Scott Davis, one of our technical sales folks, is currently online. So I know if I see the green dot, I can reach out and chat with someone. So I'm going to, I know Paul's there, so I can say, so I'm talking to Paul. I'm talking to Paul. Paul, I'm about to make major changes. So I send a little chat message over here. If I go whoosh and switch over to my other machine, I'm now Paul Sanderson, you can see up top, and I've got a chat message waiting for me. So again, it sees that, hey, I'm Paul, I'm inside of this model, and I've got a chat message waiting for me. Click on the chat head, and there it is. So you can chat back and forth. That contextual awareness is pretty straightforward. And the other cool thing I just want to show real quick is the process of syncing with Central and that activity feed. So I'll show that right now. So I said I was going to make some changes to the curtain wall, and of course, since I'm a mechanical engineer and not an architect, you don't want me to do that, but I'm going to do it anyways. So let's go ahead and make some changes. Changing curtain wall from a storefront. Let's see if I get another one. Storefront 2. Hopefully this doesn't break too much. So winging it here to Hangout. Hopefully you guys don't deduct or issue a demerit to me. So I've changed the type of that curtain wall, and I want to submit it. So the same workflow applies as traditional Revit work sharing. I need to sync with Central. So I can choose whether or not I want to push stuff in. So, and I can also leave a comment, and I'll show in a second why that matters. So I've gone ahead and triggered Sync with Central, and now, like we talked about, Revit starts transacting with the cloud. So if I fire up Windows Resource Monitor, aside from sharing my screen, and you can see the bandwidth associated with sharing my screen, I'm seeing that Revit has now started transacting with the cloud. So that's not something inside of my machine. That's something that Revit is connecting with and communicating. So I'm transacting across the cloud. And the cool part about this, if I switch over to Paul, Paul knows that I'm syncing with Central. And this is a nice little improvement that I really like. You see this little animated icon next to the timeline? That tells me that someone in your model is syncing with Central at that very moment. And if I go ahead and click over to that timeline, here's my Sync with Central history. You're seeing that Kyle is syncing right now, and here's the comment that he made about a Sync with Central. So we really like this. Customers are really liking this, the idea of just getting a more open communication. And the cool part about this is this isn't limited to people in your company. Now, of course, there's perfectly good reasons that maybe only the people in your company work on a given model, but technology isn't in the way anymore. You could have your team be a sprawling team across multiple companies and networks, and you could all be communicating in the same way. So it's exciting stuff, and that's the main part that I wanted to show here. A few other things. Actually, you know what? I'll stop and take questions that might exist around this Communicator tool before we jump into some of the administrative capabilities of the service. So, any questions, Bud, you're seeing coming in around the Communicator?
Yeah, one of the guys wanted to know if the history is tracked on the communications.
Yeah, everyone always asks that. That's a great question. So the history is definitely contained in a cloud service, and for me as a user, if I sign in to another user's machine, or not even another user's machine, another machine with my identity, you're going to see my chat histories come with me. So you'll see my active chats and the history. So the conversations are definitely stored in the cloud. Most people tend to ask this question around auditing, having an audit trail around decisions. A lot of times communications around projects need to be maintained under a certain level of stringency. That is not what we're currently doing. I don't want to oversell it. If I wanted to, I could save as like a text file. I mean, that's there. I could save a chat history and say, hey, you told me this on this date. Here's the chat record for it. So that functions, absolutely. But it may not necessarily be exactly what people are looking for, and we're looking to improve that over time. Go for it.
Just one other quick question. It may or may not be related. I'm not a Revit guy, as you know. The guy wanted to know about dealing with large point cloud data. Does Revit deal with that?
Oh, yeah, Revit does. Okay, so good question. So Revit as a platform handles large point cloud data, better than any other BIM platform on Earth, that's for sure. And so we use our recap technology. And so I suspect what people are asking is, hey, can I like cloud link a point cloud? The answer is no, not currently, and that's a really challenging technical problem. So if I'm working on a cloud work shared Revit model that does have a point cloud, there's a perfectly valid solution that allows everyone to locally locate their point cloud and not have to worry about pathing. There's, just to show you here real quick, for the gentleman or gal that asked, if you go into File Locations, you'll see this guide is called Route Path for Point Clouds. That can be any location on your machine or even in your network, although I wouldn't recommend it. And basically that just defines where the data is located, and that can change between users. So basically, as far as Revit is concerned, the location of the point cloud is relative to your route path. So as long as everyone has basically the same file structure starting at the route path, you've got consistent links. Over time, we definitely would like to have cloud-located point clouds, but right now, with point clouds being 75, 80, 100 gigabytes of data in the worst-case scenario, we haven't figured out a good solution to stream that data down. And most people don't want to be downloading 80 gigabytes of data across every user's machine. So it's a work in progress. A couple other things I want to show in terms of the experience in here before we start talking about the roadmap is we have this little administrative console. So I'm working in Audubon. I can drill into that. And here's where I can start doing some administrative tasks. We talked about pushing models to A360 Team, so I can go ahead and do that if I wanted to by clicking this button to publish the latest. But I can also do things like rename my model. I can view the versions. This is a common question. So, basically every single Synquist Central in the entire history of the model is saved in the cloud. So you can always restore back at any given time. So that's a pretty valuable thing to understand, that you can go back, and you don't have to worry about some local archiving system. And as our friends and our cloud service provider tell us, the scenarios in which we will actually lose data, a hurricane might come by the region where the service operates, and this whole region may go down, but the scenarios in which we actually lose data are scenarios in which you probably don't care about your job anymore. You probably care about like the success and future history of the human race. So the data's there. It's just, the service might go down in the event that like a hurricane comes through Virginia, which is particularly where we're located. But this console allows you to do things like delete models, view those versions, restore them, and in the event that somebody's got a bunch of elements checked out that they need to return, you can force relinquish elements from others. That's a little administrative tool. So that's the core stuff that's in Collaboration for Revit. I guess the one final thing that I'd like to show, I take that back. It relates to our investments for changes that are coming. So I'm going to jump back into our slide deck here just to illustrate a couple of things. So what you've seen is really what we shipped in December, but we've continued to make some changes. So a couple of things I just want to show. A common piece of feedback was like, hey, I love viewing my model in A360 Team. That's great, but let me control which views I can actually view inside of my web browser. And so we listened, we heard, and we built it. So now there's a button called Views for A360. It's got a similar interface to if you're choosing views for DWG export or PDF export, DWF export. So you select the rooms you want, and those are the things that show up inside of the web browser on A360. So you asked, we listened, and that's something that came out in our March update. Now, let's start talking about new stuff that no one else has really heard about. That's why you guys join these types of meetings, talk with the product team. So the big thing we're working on is Communicator usage during Synquist Central. So a lot of people have told us, hey, this Communicator is awesome. I've got some downtime while Synquist Central is running. I want to chat with others on the team. And we heard that. So we made a post about, hey, here's a prototype. And we got some great feedback from folks like yourselves about how they wanted it to operate. I really wanted to have a demoable version of this today, and for a couple of different reasons, like it just wasn't in the cards. But I guess take my word for it that very soon you guys as users would have a version of Communicator that kind of runs independently of Revit. So you can use it when Revit's syncing with Central. You don't even have to be running Revit to use it. So you could install it on your project manager's machine, and you could understand who's working in what model and start asking questions. So that may be good, that may be bad, so you guys can have at your discretion whether you employ it that way. But up until now, you had to be running Revit, and if Revit was hard at work, you couldn't use the tool, and we're changing that. So we heard the feedback, and that's an investment that's going right now. And as of right now, our plan is to deliver that the end of the month of May as a capability. Another big thing is around performance. And so today, the way things function is I do a sync with Central. We have that connection between the service, and then the deltas move over. But today, those deltas are transferred in serial. So if I've got 7 different deltas associated with my changes and then another 7 coming down, those things are done one at a time. So Revit says, okay, I'm going to download this one, I'm going to download the next one, I'm going to download the next one. So what we've done with our release that's coming out actually this weekend is we got a bunch more pipes, if you want to think about it that way. So when I do my sync with Central here, I have a bunch of pipes to move those deltas back and forth between the Collaboration for Revit service, or C4R. So those deltas transferred in parallel. So what does that all mean? Well, by our performance testing, that means a roughly 30% improvement to initial model open performance and a roughly 20% improvement to a sync with Central command with a large delta that's being passed between the client running Revit and the service that's managing that cloud work shared model. So those are pretty cool stuff. So we know there's still a lot more performance we can wring out of this sponge, and we're working on it. But we're pretty excited that as of this weekend's new version that's coming out, you're going to see some pretty significant improvements, and our teams have worked really hard on that. So moving along, another thing that we did is we've done some significant investments to improve and optimize our little internal jargon. We call it PAC, Personal Accelerator. So previously, this is a real-world customer model. One of the teams that did our production beta, so we had real-world customer teams working on this service before it was launched. They were kind enough to give us access to their live model. If we promised them, we wouldn't do anything but just load it. And so we did that. We loaded it in Collaboration for Revit, the version that was launched at the beginning of March. And then we went ahead and we've got the one we're about to launch this weekend. And so we've got an order of magnitude reduction in overall data downloaded per machine. So a huge difference in getting that data up and loaded. And that goes along with the 30% reduction in time to get that model open. So we're really excited about this one. The folks that care about bandwidth bills and bandwidth consumptions across your network, you'll be pretty excited about this as well. So that's a big one that we've rolled out here. And so the final thing, so again, those are insights for stuff that's coming out. That's not stuff that's available yet, but hey, that's why you guys come to the Hangout. I wanted to share it with you guys. The final thing to show is that when we update the service will go down for a certain period of time. We try to make it happen in the evening or nights, really, of most of our users. So basically, it starts in the night on Friday Pacific time, and the service will be down for roughly 12 hours, and then it's back up again. And so we actually have a web page that communicates this. I'm going to figure out how best to communicate that out to all you participants, the actual URL, but there is a web page that lists this, not just the one that's coming this weekend, but all the stuff down the road, and we do our best to keep it updated with the downtime. So again, in the spirit of full disclosure, these things do happen. Also in the spirit of full disclosure, we want to stop downtimes from happening altogether as we update, and that's something that we're working on over time, because we realize sometimes you guys got deadlines. Sometimes architecture and engineering firms work crazy hours in the name of a deadline, and we certainly don't want to get in the way of that. So we're working on that, but in the spirit of full disclosure, that's kind of how things function. So I think I've got 2 or 3 other key things to show about actually purchasing the service, and then we're going to open it up for questions for the last little bit. So everyone always asks, okay, what's it cost? So the way the service functions is you buy it per user. So you could buy 10 users if you wanted to. You could buy 15 users, that sort of thing. And then you can freely allocate and reallocate who gets it. But if I have Collaboration for Revit associated with my identity, I can have unlimited projects, unlimited models, unlimited size of those models, all I can eat. under our current business model. And that amounts to roughly $67 per user per month if I've done a yearly subscription. If I do a month-to-month subscription, it's a higher month-to-month cost. But we find most people do yearly, so that's what we put on the slide. And you can go ahead and purchase that on our e-store, but most people like yourself would work with your local reseller to actually get a subscription going. And that's typically how things work. So again, you're basically purchasing per user, and they have unlimited usage of the service. And so that unlimited usage means if somebody's got Collaboration for Revit associated with their Autodesk ID, they can go use it anywhere in the A360 ecosystem. So if I've provisioned it for one of my users, that user can go use it on a project in my company's hub or any other company's hub, so long as they are a project member. So in essence, that entitlement follows you anywhere you go in the A360 ecosystem. So if you want to get all this stuff working, you got to get a skyscraper or a Collaboration for Revit entitlement. You need to get a project membership in A360 Team, and you need to make sure your Revit is updated. And if you get those three things together, well, you're cloud work sharing with Collaboration for Revit. So that's the content I wanted to cover with you guys. Hopefully this has been really informative. Let's wrap it up with questions. So Bud, I think you are our fearless question asker. Let's fire away.
Come in. We've tried similar solutions with Collaborate via the cloud and always get central file access errors as multiple users try to communicate with the central. Are these still going to be the errors of C4R?
I guess my answer to that is, boy, I hope not. Certainly we haven't heard, that's part of the whole reason we built this, is to have rock solid access. And so I guess the best way I can answer that question is as follows. Before we released this service commercially, we had 6 different project teams, so it was roughly about 20 different companies on working on a total of 6 projects using the service. We granted them free usage of the service, and we did not require them to keep using the service. So they said, hey, we've got free usage of this new service. They had to give us feedback, but if they said, you know what, I had corruption, this is slow, for any reason, they could just take their models locally and go back to doing what they were doing. Not a single one of those teams has chosen to walk away from it. So that's the most effective way I can answer that question, because I'm a biased Autodesker if I give an answer any other way. Next question.
This guy wants to know about, can FM softwares interact with A360 for operations, maintenance, and push dated A360 projects? That doesn't sound like a Collaborate question, but
I get the essence. So that right now, anybody's interested in interfacing with A360, you can go to our Autodesk Developers Network. You'll see that there's an A360 Viewing and Data API. That is not going to solve the particular scenario that customer or developer really just asked. But what we have as an API illustrates the direction we're going. So my hope is over time, yes. Right now, you can use our awesome web viewer and do all sorts of cool viewing of that data that goes in there.